Hi there, I'm Joshua Finn from J&H Aerospace. This is the build video for the Mod4 series of Carbonette gliders. These replace the existing Carbonette 6, Super Carbonette 8, and Carbonette 12 that are currently in the J&H Aerospace lineup as of the recording of this video. So by the time that you're seeing this on our public YouTube channel, that means that those aircraft have been phased out. These aircraft feature carbon fuselages as opposed to the traditional methods with a balsa fuselage. This makes the airplanes more durable, stronger, lighter, more consistent in production, and so on. And we've accompanied that also with a little bit stronger constraints on some of the wood quality and so on, so that we can make these aircraft worth the extra value that you're paying for them. The goal is to, in particular with the Carbonette 12, to make it a contest airplane without compromises, as opposed to the previous version, which was a nice airplane, but we would give you good materials, not the ultimate, because sea grain balsa is hard to find. But in raising the cost, we've factored in there the need for sea grain balsa, so that the wings don't flutter when you really fire them off. Most of you who are using these airplanes are never going to encounter those issues, but for those of you that want to fly this airplane in indoor competition, you will appreciate those changes. Now, things that you need to know as we're proceeding into this before I start with the build. We are keeping one legacy aircraft, the Carbonette 8, with a balsa fuselage for those of you that want to go with something traditional. But the Super Carbonette 8 is transitioning over to carbon fuselage, and that's the way it's going to be. For those of you that are watching this in the beginning of the year 2020, the Science Olympiad Carbonette is not changing. So through the end of the Science Olympiad contest season for 2020, this aircraft will remain the same. You don't have to worry about that. This does not affect those of you flying this aircraft. If you're watching this in some later year and Science Olympiad Carbonettes are around because Science Olympiad is doing Elastic Launch Glider, then more than likely you're watching this video to learn how to build a Carbonette. I can't say for certain because this is the year 2020 and I can't see the future. So, with all of that explained, what we will do, and I don't have a Carbonette 6, I'm going to build a Carbonette 6 here on the table, but I do want to show you that there are some options here before we get into the build. So this is a Carbonette 12 with the pylon and a forward grip, which allows you to add that much to your length of pole when you're, when your arms are fully extended like that. So effectively, if you're holding an airplane by the tail, that effectively increases the length of your arm by that much, so you can pull that much farther back. And for outdoor AMA flying, that's important. For indoor, you can just increase the amount of rubber you're using and get the airplane higher that way. But outdoors, you're limited on power. So there are two ways to build this. One is with the forward grip, which requires you to pay some careful attention, because if you do it wrong, the airplane will rotate like this and it will come into your fingers and you'll take the tail off on launch. For those of you that are flying indoors or just don't want that risk, we have an option with the tail back here, the stinger tail, and then you mount the tail on the bottom, and now your fuselage thickness basically provides the necessary gap between the wing and tail to still get some good glide efficiency, because you want some amount of separation between the wing and the tail vertically. You want the tail below the wing. So we mount the wing on top of the tail we mount the tail on top of the tail boom when we have the pylon, because the pylon provides that gap. When we put the stinger grip back here, we're no longer concerned about getting the tail up away from your finger, so we put the tail on the bottom in the problem. There are alignment tabs on the rudder that poke through the stab that allow you to align it when you glue it on top. When you glue on the bottom, the fuselage keys into the corner between the rudder and vertical tail and the horizontal tail, and so you simply sand those tabs off. As you can see, they're not showing up there. We'll show you both of those examples in this video. So these are two prototype kits. I say prototype, they are not preliminary or anything. This is what they're going to be. I just don't have the instruction manuals in them. Your instruction manuals will have full-size plans for the airplanes. They may not have necessarily, well, they're not going to give you details on the carbon boom, because those are available from China. You can track them down if you want to, but they will include patterns, at least for the 6-inch and maybe the 12-inch, for a balsa fuselage. Should something happen and you want to recreate the airplane, you'll have full patterns to do that. There are two different forms these kits are going to come in, and I'm going to show you that in a minute so you can understand that there are slight differences. So for the Carbonette 12 and the Carbonette 8, you will have, the Super Carbonette 8, you will have this pylon pattern available for you to use. That in the Carbonette 6 will show that that's on the wing sheet. So here's your horizontal tail, vertical tail parts. You'll have your fuselage, carbon fiber, hollow, tapered. 1/32 inch square basswood strip, and then your wing. Now, what you want to inspect in particular on your wing and on your tail is to make sure these are not warped, especially the tail surfaces. They are prone to warping, so if your tail surfaces are warped, send me an email with a photo and we will get those replaced. This is your set of plywood parts, so nose hook, forward grip, and your finger rest should you choose to hand launch the airplane. So that's the part that goes right here so that you can put your finger across. On the other hand, on this airplane, since I made it as a pure catapult glider, I don't have it. So if I put my finger up here and try to throw it, I'm going to push my finger right through the wing and destroy it. This is a piece of sandpaper to use to make to either put on your forward grip, should you choose a forward grip, or on the end of your tail, should you choose to fly the airplane that way. Balancing clay, an earplug to use to make your nose bumper. Did that show up on camera? It's kind of hiding there. This is enough rubber for an AMA outdoor style catapult, and then your catapult handle. So let me set that aside, and I'll pull out the Carbonette 6. You'll see this one's not a complete kit because I left the rubber out of it. Everything else is there though. So again, shorter fuselage, your balancing clay. Check the fuselage link to the instruction sheet for the particular airplane you're building, because it's a different link for each airplane. Leading edge reinforcing strip. And here's where this becomes important. So on the Carbonette 12, there is one dihedral gauge because you only need one. On the Carbonette 6 and Super Carbonette 8, there are two dihedral gauges. The smaller one is for your inner wing panels, the larger one is for your outer wing panels. And on the Carbonette 6, you have your pylon right here rather than on a separate sheet like you have with the Super Carbonette 8 and the Carbonette 12. Again, tail surfaces, check for warps. Your launch handle, I did not have the piece of rubber in this one, so there's that. Plywood parts, nose bumper, and sandpaper. So the only two differences are I didn't have the rubber in this one, and the pylon for this specific airplane is part of the wing parts sheet. Let's talk about tools that you'll need to make this airplane. So you're going to need a pair of scissors to trim the sandpaper. You're going to need a Zona saw or something of that nature to cut the wing to set dihedral. You'll need some sort of sanding block. At present, at the current recording of this video, these sanding blocks are just something I have made. in the future you'll probably be able to find them on our website, and if that's true, there will be a link in the description saying so. Maybe not. Depends on whether I remember. So, but keep an eye out on our website. It'll be in the tools section. You need a fresh, new razor blade. Single edge is probably your best bet. Need a good quality razor plane. The Stanley Mini plane, which is $7.50 last time I checked, is a good product. You can hone it and get very good results from it. I, however, am using a Bruce Kimball plane. These are semi-custom, so you have to get on a waiting list to get it. They're $45. If you want one, contact me. It is the best quality razor plane, at least for model airplane purposes, that is available, period. And that covers everything. Except you'll need a bottle of CA and probably a bottle of CA accelerator. And then an essential tool is parchment paper. I recommend parchment paper rather than wax paper, because wax paper does actually stick to things. Parchment paper does not. So this is the material you want to build airplanes on, because you put CA down on it and it peels right off. You put epoxy down, it peels right off. Like literally, I can put CA on this, harden it, and I can peel it right off. No matter how aggressive I get with that. Your accelerant and whatnot actually will soak through this. It's slightly porous, which is an interesting property, but this is a good material to build your planes on. We are going to start by popping our wings out. I'm going to build these two airplanes kind of alongside each other because I can and whatnot. This one, laser actually didn't go quite all the way through. If you have one that gives you a lot of trouble getting it out, email me and we'll make it right. So your wings should come out something like that. In the case of this little guy, it'll come out a little bit easier because, like I said, it's cut correctly. Now, take your leading edge strip and go over to the sink and soak this in water. So pour water all down it, get it wet, wipe off the excess, and then come back. So what we're gonna do is center this up so you have about the same amount sticking out either side. I'm gonna start by gluing this leading edge strip on here. And you can take this in segments. And what I want to do is I don't want to center this on the leading edge. What I want to do is I want this leading edge strip to be flush with one side. So I don't know if you can see that. It's flush with the bottom here. So there's a gap on the top. And that accounts for our airfoil shape. And I should mention, I did not sand the leading edge of this wing, and I've got a few little tabs still sticking out from the from removing from the carrier sheet. So you may want to go back and clean those up before gluing this on. In my case, wood is soft enough I can just kind of press it in there and it'll hold. And just wrap this around basically as far around the edge of the wing as it'll go. There we go. Don't worry about doing anything funky for aligning the wing, the leading edge strip to account for washout or anything, because the washout is already incorporated through the skewed dihedral joins on this wing. There we go. You can bevel that off to get an appropriate shape there. And now that leading edge strip is applied. You may want to take your sandpaper at this point and sand that to where it feathers smoothly in from 0 thickness up to full thickness. And there we go. Now, one thing, if you're using this airplane for AMA standard class catapult glider, measure the thickness here and make sure it is less than 3 inches. If it's not at this time, run a plane across the trailing edge to take away as much as necessary to get this slightly, 3 inches or less. Don't worry about the wingspan right now, because after dihedral, this should be less than 12 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go away and I'm going to go ahead and put the leading edge strip on my Carbonette 6. I am going to take off the laser burrs on this one because they're a little more prominent and I want them gone. So there we go. You can also clean them off of the trailing edge. This one still has them on the trailing edge, so I might as well take them off of there too. Just make things that much better. Okay, so we have lined the leading edge on the Carbonette 6. Let's set these guys aside for a minute. And I am going to just show you checking wing chord here. We are coming out to just over 2 7/8 chord, so it's well under. Now, once we've got this wing shaped, you may want to come in here just so you can get a smooth starting point. You may want to sand the underside of the wing, which is the part where the leading edge is flush. Just sand that part. Don't worry about anything on the top, because that's all going to go away anyway. And this part is as well, because we're going to sand some upsweep into it, but that just gets the wing to lay flat for you. So now take your razor plane and we're going to plane across this wing, and about 1/4 of the way back on the leading edge here, and you can even put a mark if you want to. We're planing up to that and we want a wedge, so we want a straight taper back to the tail, and we want a tail trailing edge, and we want the wing about 1/32 of an inch thick back here. You don't want to go any thinner because the wing gets wavy at that point and you get no aerodynamic benefit of any consequence from going thinner. So I'm actually tilting the plane over here. You can see this edge of the curl is paper thin and this side is not. Just like that. And as you start to work your way in, you can now come further up the wing and take another pass. And ideally, I don't know if you notice, I'm kind of skewing the plane here while going straight across. So I'm going in a what's actually a side slip here. And that just gets you a little smoother of a cut. And we're down to about a 1/16 of an inch thick there, so we've taken about a 30, I don't know, taking some amount off. And so I've started my taper here, and it's going all the way down. Get a little bit of a ridge here. We may just hit that with sandpaper to take it out. Down to about a 1/20 of an inch thick at the back. Now you want to be very careful on this tip here, because you can actually come in and you can remove the actual tip of the wing, and it was actually starting to bite in there enough to do that. So what we'll do is nope. So the grain on this piece of wood actually slopes down slightly that way, which means the blade's trying to dig in. We're at a 32nd of an inch thick back here, so we're going to stop. I'm going to just hand sand this part down to the same thickness as everything else. And I'm actually going to start angling across here to try to go from here back to here just as a straight cut, or profile, I should say. We're starting to get there. I've almost gotten rid of the ridge right there. And we're below a 32nd of an inch thick there, but if I lay my sanding block across this, I don't see any light shining out under this when I look at it the other way. It goes straight across. And so what you're going to want to do is just continue that all the way across this wing. I should mention I'm using the 180 grit side of this sanding block. Okay, we have the wing sanded to a smooth taper. I've got it pretty close to paper thin back here, which is not ideal, but the trailing edge is straight. Try to avoid going that thin though. I'm going to go ahead and kind of demonstrate on the 6-inch wing. I'm really cutting a bit too deep per pass. So what we'll do is we'll loosen this up. And we'll try to get a little bit less. That's a little bit better. And we'll go one more pass, starting from. And that's how it's supposed to go. I mean, literally done. I don't even need to sand it until I'm ready to profile the whole wing. I don't know how well that shows up, but you can see got a little bit of a thick spot here. We'll sand that out later. Or I can sand it now. Let's see if I can show it. Yeah, you see it's almost the same there. Okay, so we're going to take this wing and we're going to profile the leading edge. So we start on the top, and what I'm wanting to do is run around like that, and we're trying to do both sides exactly the same. Starting to dig a little bit into the leading edge stripping here. Kind of want to avoid going too far into it. You can go into it some, but you don't want to go through it. And then we'll make one last pass. Can support a little more. And there we go. So there's a little ledge here. I don't know if that even shows. But what we have is a wedge across here, and we'll address cleaning that up in just a minute. What we first want to do is run across the bottom here, out to about there. You don't want to go all the way to the tip, about halfway across the tip. Do the same thing going the other direction. Make sure you're not going all the way through, which is basically what mine's trying to do. And right there we'll stop. So at this point you can come in and you can round off the leading edge from the underside here. Not too much out here, but in here you want to. So you want it to do a half round on the leading edge, so it's going to be sharp on top. And you'll gradually taper this back to about there. So we have this wing, of course, finished out as far as the rough shaping with razor plane. I repeated the same procedure on the smaller wing for the Carbonette 6, just so we can have those going alongside each other. And the Super Carbonette 8 is somewhere in between the two, of course. We have feathered out our thickness. The one thing I would say is that on this wing, I've already done it on this one, you may want to take the plane out here and try to thin out this tip a little bit, or alternatively you can just wait and do it with sandpaper as you're cleaning up everything with your sandpaper. Just try not to thin things too much out here and potentially remove a chunk of wood at the wingtip, because I have done that before. And so on this wing, I've already sanded this area back here because we ran into some minor issues with getting everything smooth. This wing I have not, so if you're at that, ideally you would be in this scenario where you can just come along and you can sand everything nice and smooth back here, and it takes literally just a few moments of swiping across this, and we're already there. And that is, you can learn to just feel that there's a steady slope all the way back here, and it's good. And then at that point, start shaping the front. And this area is a clean wedge down to the leading edge. You can round off this area up here a little bit. Thin out our wingtips. And there we go. So the top surface of that wing is now done. We'll come in and just on this one, we'll show the same procedure. So what I'm doing here is I am sanding this all the way across here so it's flat along this area. The wing is just sloping down. It's flat. There's no curvature to this area. Once I've done that, I can round off the peak that comes right along here so that it's not quite as sharp. And that's really all we want to do there. And then out at the wingtips, we're just going to feather this in to a smooth curve out here. This area is still a little bit on the thick side. Actually round this part down just out here at the very tip of the wing, just like that. And then we just want to repeat the same thing on this wing. You can see here, this being a smaller wing, much less detail, or much less time is required to get a relatively similar result. One of the things you want to do is feel your tips there to make sure that they feel like they're about the same thickness, so they feel the same as each other. So you should feel that somewhat tight curve here, and you should feel right there that it just kind of disappears into the rest of the curvature of the wing. At this point, what we're going to do is we're going to cut the wings up. So use a hobby saw, like a Zona saw or something like that, and what you want to do is make sure you're cutting clean straight across these score marks or cut marks on the wing. And try not to do what I just did, which is to tear a piece off. A glue bottle that doesn't have the end plugged up. Now, what you want to do is start beveling these wings for their dihedral angle. And you can go in and you can take the dihedral gauge for your wing, for the particular part of your wing, and you can use that to kind of start estimating what the angles are that you need to bevel. So I'm looking at this, my bevel angle needs to be about half of that. And there are various ways you can jig this up if you want to get it really, really exact. But so we can start looking for about like that angle. Now I see a lot of people that end up sanding the wing like this. And that's set up for your wing to do this. So you want just a shallow angle here, just very shallow. And if you want to know kind of what that angle should be, set this dihedral gauge here on the side and line this guy up vertically here, and you can get in sight down there, and you can see kind of what that angle has to be, and that's twice the angle that you need for any of these breaks because you sand both sides here. And it is very important that you don't go around like this, you go straight back and forth. And so that gives us half of the angle. Now we go to the other side here. And that's what we're looking for right there. Now do not glue this joint at this time because you want to join this one first, then the outers. Now it is important, you don't want to use too much glue, but you want that entire surface to be glued along there. You want to move quickly because the glue will tend to harden very, very quickly. And it is important that the leading and trailing edge be lined up at the same angle all the way across here. Any little gaps where glue is not, I want to fill those in.
Again, making sure leading edges are lined up along here, and the trailing edges are lined up. And there we go. Now on this airplane we're using the same dihedral gauge. We've got the little wedged end here. We're using that for both the inner and outer dihedral. And then lastly, we'll add the other wingtip on. There we go. So that's the 12-inch wing, and again we used the single dihedral gauge. I'll show on the 6-inch how you build the 6-inch and 8-inch, which use different dihedral gauges for the inner and outer here in a minute. But first, we want to take this little rectangular piece out. In this piece, you're going to cut to a triangular cross section. So you can use a razor blade, or you can use the plane or sandpaper or some combination of all of the above to get that result. One second. That piece, assuming you are right-handed, it's going to go on the underside of your left wing, right there, right next to the dihedral brake. One thing I will also mention is my wing is actually a little fuzzy on the bottom, so now's a good time to go with really fine sandpaper and just clean that up. So that's the 12-inch wing ready to be joined to a fuselage. Now we have the 6-inch wing kind of staged up here. I've already sanded the dihedral on this airplane. So what you're going to do is you have a large gauge and a small gauge. So on the Super Carbonette 8, you'll have the same type of an arrangement. And the way this works is the smaller of these gauges goes with the inner. So on the Super Carbonette 8, the inner is this teeny little thing. And what you want to look for is one of these edges in this notch here is angled down slightly, and so the wing nests into that. So it provides a little shelf, again, like this. And so that shelf part, the angled part, is what the wing sits under, just like that. Like that. So setting that exactly as we had it. Put glue on here. And then, in the event that the glue is a little sluggish to harden, it with some CA accelerator. And there we go. Now, set your small dihedral gauge aside because you're done with it. Get your larger dihedral gauge, and again, it uses the angled part as the part that the wingtip is going to nest into. Now we're just going to round off down here. So our dihedral gauges are nice and smooth. Dihedral gauges, dihedral joins. And then same procedure as before, pop out the washing wedge, and this is a trimming aid that makes the airplane fly more easily. left wing inner panel right next to the dihedral join as before. And again, this is if you're flying the airplane right-handed. If you're left-handed, you would reverse this. Got a little short on glue there, so fix that. No problem. So, Carbonette 12 wing, Carbonette 6 wing. So we're going to pop out the tail surfaces for the Carbonette 12. And you want to just sand off any of the areas where it's connected into the sheet. Now, very important, there are center line marks on this wing. On the smaller ones, there are not center line marks, but you can see a point here so you can tell which way things are offset. What you want is for the rudder, the vertical tail that is, when it drops in here, you want it to be left of your center line if you're right-handed. So in this case, that means this is the top of my horizontal stab. And then what I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to feather from maximum thickness here out to nice and thin at the tips. It doesn't have to be super thin, but you want it to be decently thin. If you go too thin, the tail surfaces will flutter on the way up, and they'll get easily damaged in handling. So what I'm doing is I'm holding this edge off of the surface and this edge kind of down against it so that I get a wedge shape here. And with that, we have a nice airfoil in there on that horizontal step. For the vertical tail, you want basically the same curvature on both sides. It doesn't have to be exact, it needs to be decently close. As long as you are planning on being very careful in handling the airplane, the trailing edge can be very, very thin on the vertical tail. At this point, we can run that one it's plugged. Never mind. Run glue all along here on the vertical tail. And we can just drop it right in there. Now, since I have a fairly substantial airfoil in mine, I have a little gap right here which you could clean up various ways. I'm not going to mess with it. It mainly just doesn't look nice. And you'll have the little tabs sticking out of the bottom here that serve as alignment guides if you mount this on the top of your fuselage with a pylon configuration. At this time, there's a decision you needed to make as far as how you're going to assemble this aircraft, be it with the tail surfaces on the bottom, no pylon, and a stinger grip, or pylon, tail surfaces on the top, and a forward grip. And we've discussed the reasons for that beforehand, but the bottom line is for like outdoor flying, you want the grip up front so that you can get more clearance. The issue is that you have to practice to make sure you don't hit the tail surfaces. I'm going to set my Carbonette 12 up without a pylon, so that means the first thing I'm going to do is actually sand these alignment tabs off the bottom of the tail. Just like that. And now at this time I can simply put the fin on the right side and set it in there like that. Leave enough sticking out the back that you can get a good grip back here. Also, rough up the part of your tail boom is going to be in contact with all that. Try not to use too much glue. And what we're trying to do is get this, the tail glued directly into the apex there, so there's no gap vertically or horizontally there. And now I have enough area that I can reach back here and I can grab to pull for my launch. And just enough space. You don't want to run your fingers into that, so you may want to leave more than I left. I left barely over half an inch. Actually, let me get you an exact number for what I did, which is, yeah, about 7/16 of an inch. Most of you will prefer about 5/8 of an inch, so over half of an inch. The next step then is to attach the wing, and the wing is going to go 4.1 inches back from the nose of the airplane. So you can set up some sort of a marking. It's just under 4 1/8 inches back. And what we'll do is we'll slide this in a little bit and hold my tail down with something here. Just going to use a mug to hold that part down. And so the wing is going to be glued right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and sand the relevant area. And that just gives me that much stronger of a glue bond. Now, important to note is that once I glue this assembly on here, I want this side of the tail a little bit higher relative to the wing than that side. So what I can do is find a shim of some sort, balance that. I'm using one of the dihedral wedges. And the result is that my wing, the inner panel is not quite parallel to the stab. You don't want it tilted so much that it's parallel to that unless you're flying really, really tight circles somewhere. Now what you want is for this dihedral break to be parallel to that fuselage. Do whatever you have to do, measuring angles or whatever, to make sure that's correct. Now we have everything attached. We'll deal with everything that goes up front after we assemble the Carbonette 6. On the Carbonette 6, we are following similar procedures to what I've said. We're mounting, since I'm showing this one where you're going to set up with a forward grip, I'm going to mount the stab on top of the fuselage. And you can see how those tabs lock in there, so I slide the tail boom over against those. I'm going to put the end of the tail boom flush with the end of the horizontal tail and vertical tail, since they are aligned. And there we go. And that leaves us with a vertical tail offset slightly to the right, which has negligible aerodynamic impact. Now remember, on the Carbonette 6, the pylon is part of the wing sheet. On the Carbonette 12, and the Super Carbonette 8, it's a separate sheet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to round off the edges of this pylon. Be careful because the grain is vertical, so this is a very, very fragile piece right now. So I've carved this, sanded this to a sharp edge back here and a rounded edge back here because the sharp angle I set at the back. You could turn it around the other way, it's your choice. Sand the top and bottom to remove any burrs. Now once your pylon is done, the top, which is the part that the angles slope away from, is going to receive glue to mount it to the wing. Now you want to carefully align this with your dihedral brake here. Be careful not to bend this part. So what I'm going to do is just gently lower that in place. Now I want it lined up at the front and at the back. Get it straight up and down like that. Aligned. And there we go. Now, at this time, we're going to lock this down, and it will be listed on your instruction handouts. So for the Carbonette 6, you need the wing 2.2 inches back from the front of the fuselage, just under 2¼ inches back. And we'll sand in here. Just like that. Now, use whatever jigs or whatever you need. Get the stab tail lying flat here so that you can glue this wing on. And again, you want this wing tilted this way a little bit, assuming you're flying to the left, so that you can glue it on here and end up with the tail tilt for a left turn. One thing to make sure is, again, that the wing is lined up, it's not skewed one way or the other. And there we go. And then, hopefully unlike me, you don't have a bubble of CA that's stuck out there and looks awful. Take your plywood parts for this one. And since this one's set up for a front grip, I'm going to glue my finger grip on the right side. It's not particularly important which side you glue it on. It is important that the catapult hook be glued on the same side, though. And what we're going to do for the catapult hook is I'm going to glue the catapult hook just a little bit back from the front of the nose like that. And these are, you want those to be parallel. So like that, and about like that, so with a little bit sticking out in front. Make sure that front hook is glued on firmly because it's going to be under a fair amount of tension. Now find your little piece of sandpaper, a pair of scissors, and cut out a little circle. There's a small little circle of sandpaper. It does not have to be big. You can see mine is tiny there. And you're going to glue that to the bottom of this finger peg, or finger grip on both sides. And that makes it much easier to grip this thing when you're pulling back. Last step is to take this nose bumper, which is an ear plug. I'm going to snip off just that much of it. I'm going to take a sharp razor blade, see if you can cut a kind of an X here in the bottom of it. And this material is not going to behave well when you're trying to do this. The main thing is that you want to get it attached to the nose, but that allows you to insert the nose into the earplug material. So what we're going to do is we're going to squirt glue into that cavity we've made. I'm going to drive the nose into that. And if you kind of push it back like that, that makes the ends kind of curl around. Because you want the back of this to not expand out and be ginormous and create gobs of drag. Ideally, also do not glue yourself to it, but that's a separate issue. So our Carbonette 6 is finished. Except that we're going to do one more thing. I want to be able to hand launch mine, so I'm going to pop my little triangle out of here. And I'm going to glue it, since I am right-handed and tend to want to put my finger on the right side of the plane. I'm going to glue it over on the right side like that. And there we go. The finger grip up here for catapulting also provides a nice finger grip for hand launching. Back to the Carbonette 12. I'm going to pop my catapult hook out. And I'm going to do the same procedure, except notice I don't have a grip here yet of any kind. I'm going to glue my catapult hook on here a little ways back from the front of the airplane. Line it up straight and down, straight up and down, like that. Just like that. I put it on the right side of the airplane. Again, not particularly critical. The next step is that I'm going to take some of that sandpaper and snip off a very short strip here. Snip it in half. It only needs to be about this long, because I'm going to wrap it around the back of my fuselage. And you only want enough that it goes all the way around. So I'm going to snip this thing even shorter, because you don't want a whole lot of weight at the back of the airplane. Now for the Carbonette 12, unlike the 6 and 8, you can use a little bit bigger of a nose bumper. And I actually recommend waiting for that thing to expand out and then trim off some edges so the back of it's nice and rounded. Because your goal is to reduce drag as much as possible. This is a very, if you're flying this airplane, chances are you're trying to get some really perfect everything. Again, same arrangement with the razor blade, if possible. My razor blade is dull, so this is not cutting particularly well. And I'm going to let that expand back out before I try to glue it. Alright, now I'm going to do the same thing. This is expanded back out. I'm going to squirt glue in it. insert the front of the airplane. Find something to press the tail against so I can do that, or not. And glue myself to the air plug again. There we go. So now it's attached. Now for the Carbonette 12, I'm going to use my other one because this one is going to become kind of more my sport flyer. If you want to do outdoor flying, you can take the nice deluxe finger grip and glue it on. And the thing to notice is it has a cutout in it, and I'll show you how to use that cutout in a minute. I'll glue bottle again. Just want to drop this on there. And notice I have it flush here and here, like that. Now that it's attached, I can take my razor blade and I can cut out the balsa that is overlapping that. You may want to hit that with a light sanding. And now I have this nice contoured finger grip on the airplane. And I'm using my forward grip there to hold the airplane. So you get a nice setup like that. I'm not doing that on this one because I'm going to use this for indoor flying exclusively, and so I don't want that on there. So this airplane is ready to go. All we have to do is balance it. If you are flying indoors, you can go ahead and balance the airplane at this time. I'm using one of our J&H Aerospace glider balancers here. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to attach clay to the nose until we get the airplane to balance at the little marks that are in the bottom of the wing. And you will want to glue this clay onto the front of the airplane. That way it won't come off in a hard impact or even a hard launch. And I like to pack the clay right behind that nose bumper. Provides a little more of a fairing, and it also just gives it a good convenient place to be. And there we are. Now, the marks here, I typically, on this airplane, fly the CG a little further back than that. So that's a good starting point, but you're going to have to tweak it. Follow our videos on that topic later. Now, for the 6-inch, if you'll notice, I have not made any attempt to balance it yet. First, since I'm going to fly this one outdoors, I want to varnish this airplane. So I'm going to take... you can watch our sweep at video. Towards the end of it, I show varnishing the airplane. But the bottom line is you take a paper towel, dip it in Minwax spar varnish, and you rub it in very gently all over the airplane. Get the airplane waterproofed. Sand after it has had a chance to dry. You only need one coat, and it does not need to be a thick coat. Just enough to get complete coverage on the entire airplane, on the wooden parts at least. Lightly sand that to get any roughness off, and you can go back and you can lightly mist paint in key areas to make the airplane easier to see. For this airplane, since I'm flying it indoors, I'm not going to do that. I could give it a light coat of nitrate dope, thinned nitrate dope, just to smooth things out, because after that I can sand the wing and get a real nice, perfectly smooth finish when I do that. So, this has been the build video for the new Mod 4 versions of the Carbonette 6, Super Carbonette 8, and Carbonette 12. I'm Joshua Finn. Hope to see you at the flying field.
Hi, I'm Josh Finn. This is Hope. We are J&H Aerospace.
If you like this video, hit the like button.
Also, how about subscribe to our channel and check out jhaerospace.com for new free flight products and all of the tooling that you'll need to build them.
Thanks for watching.